Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Incisive Thoughts, and today we are back with another episode of the GORAPS series. So, today we are going to continue from where we left off. Last time we did conclude that there is a necessary being that exists. This time we are going to build on that, and I welcome back Brother Yusuf Ponders. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So if you share my screen, we can just summarize very, very quickly what we did. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go back to the previous episode. I think it's number 2. If you want to start from the very beginning, watch episode number 1. This will be, I think, episode number 3.
Yes.
And so here is basically like a bit of a mind map that we developed during episode 2. And so we were asking the question about God's existence and about proofs for God's existence. We spoke about the fact that there are numbers of paths that you can take to come to this conclusion. There's many different arguments, and we were just focusing on one, which was the argument from dependency. I'll make that a little bit bigger. The argument from dependency. And with that argument, basically you begin somewhere, you ask, oh, I can see lots of contingent things. Is that all there is? And so then we look at the different, if things exist and that existence can be turned on and off. There's 3 ways in which you could describe that as existing. So you've got contingent existences. That's a thing where it can have its existence turned on off. An impossible existence, its existence is always off and it cannot be turned on. And a necessary existence, which would be a thing, its existence is always turned on and could be never turned off. And because there's only those 2 different modes, on, off, these are the 3, you've exhausted all variations of the way things can exist if you can turn existence on and off. So this is both. This is only one exclusively, and this is only one exclusively, but the opposite of that one, the 2 options. So then we explore, okay, we know this one exists. We know this one cannot exist by definition. It's an impossible existence. So then we ask the question, is this something that can exist? So then we assume, firstly, no. We just say, okay, let's say that it cannot exist. What, again, possible ways could contingent things exist if there is no necessary existence? And so then we explore those possibilities. So a finite chain. So you have this line of finite things that goes back into the past, a finite past. And then you have the first thing that pops into existence from nothing. And so we discussed this, and we essentially, long story short, if you want the full end of it, go watch the video. But long story short, we conclude that this is an impossible existence. So that actually fits into this one. Yeah, that it's not a real thing. It's something that cannot be. The second one is a circular dependency. And there's 2 variations that this could go out. Either you move down one route, in which case it becomes an impossible existence, or you go down the other route, in which case it's a necessary existence. And so it's not a contingent thing, and it sort of undermines itself. If you, like, in order to save it, the only way to save it is to suggest there was a necessary thing. Yeah. Which undermines the whole motivation of starting from the assumption there is no necessary thing. So if you say circular dependency, it leads to a necessary existence. And the last one will be an infinite chain. So circular dependency, it should be self-explanatory, but for those of you that didn't necessarily get it just from the name, it's like A depends on B, which depends on C, which depends on D, which depends on A. So the dependency comes back upon itself. It's almost like you have a granddad, a dad, and a son. And in order for the granddad to exist, the son has to have been there to give birth, or to give rise to his granddad. And if the son wasn't there, his granddad couldn't have existed. Therefore, he himself couldn't have existed. The infinite chain, self-explanatory. You have an infinite chain that goes into an infinite past. So you have A depends on B, depends on C, so on and so on ad infinitum. And then again, long story short, we came to the conclusion that one variation of this leads to an impossible existence. However, that depends on like whether or not you accept an infinite regress is possible or not, an actual infinite regress rather than just a potential one. And if for whatever reason someone is stubborn upon that and they must suggest that an infinite regress is possible, then again, this negates the idea that there is no necessary existence, because to posit this, you have to posit that that is a necessary existence as well. And both of these being a necessary existence, we tie them to an objection. And long story short, the objection holds that contingency is a type of quality that can be inferred to the whole from the part. And so the example we gave is like if you're building a wall with bricks made out of rock. If every brick in the wall is small, then you cannot infer that the whole wall is small. That would be what we call a fallacy of composition. That's not the type of quality you can infer from part to whole. But if every brick in the wall is made of rock, then the wall can be said to be made from rock. That is the type of quality that can be inferred from part to the whole. And long story short, we say that contingency is not a relative quality like big or small, which is dependent upon the thing you're talking about and in relation to what and to who. The brick might not be small in comparison to an ant. That's a giant brick. Yeah, and that wall is even more giant. Like, so these words are very contextual and relative to the discussion and to the things they're talking about and who is talking about them or what they're connected to. Whereas whether or not the wall is made of rock is not contingent. It's not. It's not subjective. Yeah, it is objectively the case. This is rock. Yeah, and it doesn't matter who's talking about it and in context or like in relation to what. This is made of rock, and therefore, if the wall is made out of all of these things, the whole wall is made out of rock. And contingency is like that. It's not relative quality. This thing is or it is not contingent. If it is contingent, that is absolutely so. It's like it's not dependent upon, the context. It's not dependent upon who is talking about it. This thing is contingent, whether it's me that's discussing it or you or Dave or Bob. Yeah, it always will be and always is a contingent thing, and so therefore, that is the type of quality that can be inferred to the whole from the part. And if the universe is just a collection of contingent things, then the universe itself must be contingent. And so then we come to the conclusion of that exploration. You cannot suggest there is no independent necessary existence. Options 1, 2, and 3 are impossible existences, or we could add to that. In order to save them, you must posit they are necessary. Therefore, it has to be a fourth option, that there is an independent necessary thing. Is there a way for me to make this bigger? There we go. Yeah, independent necessary being. It's distinct. Distinct from this is a set of contingent things. So you've got two things. You've got the necessary being, and then over here you have the sets of contingent things, which we're going to call the universe or creation. And that particular point is a conclusion that comes from here, from my objection to attempts to save these two, the circular dependency and an infinite chain. The set of contingent things is itself contingent, and the set is dependent upon the necessary being. So it has this this constant connection to it. It is being sustained by the necessary being, and whatever it has, it's getting it from that because of its dependency relation. And so from here, okay, we've got this independent necessary being. And so now we want to talk about not just the fact that it's a necessary being. We want to talk about these other things as well, and these other attributes. And so we're going to, at this point, bring this over here. So does the necessary being have other attributes? And we can start to look and discuss this. about, is there a way of thinking about how this necessary being in relation to what we can see around us, you've got this set of contingent things. Are there things within that set that would infer something about what this set is dependent upon? So by looking at the universe, can we come to some conclusions about the thing that gave rise to the universe? For example, if you're looking at a painting, are there conclusions that you can come to about the painter by looking at a painting? Yeah, like, what is a painting? It's trying to communicate something about, in a sense, the experiences of the painter. It's trying to communicate in some way something that the painter wants to communicate to you. That's the function of art. Art is not meant to be pointless, without meaning, without purpose, without function. Art is a form of communication. Yeah, it's a way for the painter to communicate something to the viewer of his paintings, to the recipient, to the other end, and in some ways maybe even towards himself. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the universe, if we're saying that there is a necessary being, and then you have creation or the universe, in the same way, what I'm saying here is that you can infer things about the quote unquote the painter. Yeah, the painter is the creator, and the painting is the creation. Yeah. So what then can we infer? And there's a number of attributes that we want to discuss in particular. I don't want that to come over there like that. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so we're going to talk about these attributes. So knowledge, wisdom, power, life, will, all awareness, which has a link to consciousness, but we'll be very, very specific by what we mean by consciousness. And we can then, we'll make mention of some others as well. These ones, I've put their linked to future arguments. So we can discuss these in relation to things like revelation or prophethood, which is going to come up obviously later on down the line, because we're going over GORAP here. And at the moment we're on G, which is God's existence. Then we will go over O, which is oneness of God. And then we'll go over R for revelation, A for affirmation, and then P for prophethood. So revelation and prophethood, they tie into this as well. So we can make mention of them now as a precursor. Because if you are convinced by the R and the P, then this would also follow. Yeah, that God, and there's other attributes as well. Like, for example, we could say, mercy. These are dependent arguments because we're finding them out from revelation. And there's certain things that you could only know from revelation. Yeah, like without that being revealed to us from an all-knowing, wise, powerful God, that like using reason alone isn't necessarily going to get you there. We could also tie these to fitra, where the acceptance of these things can be very easy for someone if they're in their what we would call like a natural state, and that it's only maybe a reaction to trauma or a confusion or a deficiency in the agent that might move them away from recognizing certain attributes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is where you get the expression of someone who's maybe not apathetic, like an anti-theist, antagonistic. There's a word for it. I can't remember the word.
Misotheist.
But yeah, misotheist. Yeah, mesotheist. So someone who who recognizes God exists, but they have this animosity towards him. To word it as best as we can. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be exploring this. And keep in mind this connects directly to here. So if we zoom out again, we've got the question of God's existence. There's many different paths. We've took this particular path. This path has objections, and essentially these objections should loop you back here to this particular conclusion, which is this. And so now we're exploring that with this. So let's go through it. Let's think about knowledge. So, Khalid.
Yeah. So I think what we can start off with. First of all, like I like that how you summarized everything again. I mean, so it's good that in a few minutes we got the full summary of the whole argument that we touched on previously. Now, if you look at the whole universe, like I also like the painter analogy a lot. So when we look at the universe, I mean, the contingency argument we can see can run even if the universe was very simple, like a blob, like nothing but just one blob. Still, the contingency argument would run, because if there is contingency, like you need a necessary existence to explain its limitations and whatever it is. But the universe that we see, the painting that we see, is not just a small blob. It's something very specific. And many astrophysicists, cosmologists would tell us that actually the universe is actually formulated, created, or emerged, or whatever word we want to use it, on a very narrow life permitting range. When we look at the cosmological constant, when we look at, for example, the gravitational constants, when we look at the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the neutron mass ratio, when we look at all of these, now these might be some technical terms, but when we look at them, there could have been various different possibilities. Sometimes it is raised to the power of 10, 20, 30 more, like with 30 zeros, but only one out of that possibility, one hair splitting narrow range, would have allowed this universe to actually formulate life, in a sense where first of all chemistry was formulated, where chemistry was formulated, and then we could have something like atoms and other elements, and that chemistry was specifically directed in a way where at least we can potentially think of biology emerging from that. Other possibilities, if we think of, if physicists say that if these life permitting range, these laws of the universe, if they were not fine tuned in this, we could not imagine a universe that was like the universe that we have. There are other possibilities that we can think of, where at the Big Bang, the universe could have fully collapsed back in, or it could have expanded so fast to the point where there would not be any galaxies or stars or other things. So from that perspective, we see that this painting, the universe, actually shows a very specific kind of choice that has been chosen in some sense out of all of these contingent possibilities. So for the necessary, like for the contingency argument, any could have been enough to derive that there is a necessary existence. But we have this specific choice, which is this narrow life permitting range. And I mean, we can link to other details about this argument. I have 2 videos on my channel with Miles K. Donohue, philosopher, who talks in depth about this argument. So people can actually go there if they want to go deep into this argument. But the point that I'm trying to raise here is that when we look at this universe, I mean, why is this narrow life permitting range? It can dictate to us, or it can tell us something about the necessary existence, which is that in some sense you can make a conclusion that it has knowledge and it has choice, because out of these contingent possibilities, if there is one that comes about, which we live in, this specific painting that tells us 2 specific things about the necessary existence, that it has knowledge to, and it also has choice. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so this sort of is its own discussion, which links to many of these. So you've got this idea of purpose, function, and meaning being present in the universe. And we were talking specifically about how you have these running narratives when you're looking at things. Examples I often give are like the phone, the watch. These things have a function and a purpose. We impose upon them as conscious agents. And so when you see these things existing, you can infer, again, the producer of that, the human being, has made this with function. And that was sort of like, we'll summarize it with the argument. So it's the argument from design. Yeah. You have these things that you see, and you can say, yeah, this product must have been the result of something wide. So like if I take, for example, a fork or a spoon, something very simple, like I don't go anywhere without.
Hmm.
Well, I do. I go lots of places without it, but I've got, and I always have had, a Swiss Army knife, and it's got lots of cool little things. Where's the camera? There's the camera. Yeah.
Hmm.
Boop, boop, boop. Like, this is a very cool device, and it's got this little bit here, acts as a spring which puts tension on it and brings the scissor back, so you can cut things effectively. So if I get my, I can slice through that with the help of this. So this has a function, and if I was to look at this on the floor and we're walking along the street with an atheist and I see this, I go, oh, that's an accident. That is definitely the product of randomness. They'd be like, no, that's not likely at all. It would be much safer to assume this is the product of a conscious agent. Yeah, that this is the product of design, of someone that has knowledge, wisdom, and is building something with a purpose and a function in mind. Yeah, they are building it with a use. It's not arbitrary. It's not just got a pair of scissors in it. It's got lots of different tools, and each of them has its own function. Like this little weird curly bit here. What's that? It's not a pigtail. It's a corkscrew. And inside of the corkscrew, what's that here? It's a little baby screwdriver. Yeah, or like, oh, look at this. We've got another little thing that just slides out of this bit. What's that? Oh, it's tweezers. Okay, you can use them for things. So, like, all of these parts of this thing have a function. And because we can recognize that there's a function in there, it's very, very easy. Very, very easy, even for an atheist, to look at this and jump to the conclusion that there must have been a creator that had certain attributes, knowledge, wisdom, that it was creating it with a meaning and a purpose and a function. And that's a simple item, relatively simple. Yeah, we can get more complex, so we can move to the watch or the iPhone. Yeah, we could move to something like the Hadron Collider. And if we were walking and then we stumbled upon this, if he laughed at me for suggesting this was the product of randomness, he would laugh at me more if I suggested this was. Yeah. Like he'd be much less willing, I should suspect, to accept that this device with its camera, with its battery, with its touch screen, if you open it up and you see its processor and its memory units and its, like all of these different component parts and the way they play together, and like how they give rise to something with much greater functions and a massive like variety of them. Like you've got countless apps now. That you have to come to the conclusion this is the product of some sort of designer, some sort of designer that has knowledge, wisdom, etc. And
yeah, 1 second, I just wanted to address one concern. Like generally when we talk about this, I get some arguments from atheists that, but you already know, because we see that they phones are built in a factory, or this Swiss knife also we know because we already have prior information about how they create. But then the issue is that even if we were on the moon and we find some device, some technology, we would still
an alien object. And
alien object.
Even if you were a caveman, let's say you go back in time to prior to this, like they didn't have something like this in like back in the day, but you could still stumble upon it and go, oh, look at this, you can use this for this. And like this thing, like if I just find a rock on the floor, it has a limited number of uses, and it doesn't give the appearance of sort of design on itself, like a rock randomly formed. When you start getting very, very complex structures, like this is a complex structure, this isn't likely to have been the product of something that is random. That's the point. It's like this particular shape, the way that the hinges work to allow you to do extra things and to repeat that process, to hide it. Like even the ability to hide that blade keeps it safe, so I can hold that, and it's not going to cut me. Whereas if the blade was constantly revealed, I could easily cut myself on that. So these things, whether or not, like I could take that to a tribesman that's never seen phones before, has been stuck in the jungle, and I could show him this thing and I could show him the things that it does, and he would be amazed by it because he recognizes that, like, there's wisdom being expressed here. Like, this is an amazing thing. Yeah. And he doesn't have to have seen that before to be able to recognize that. Or, like we say, if there was some sort of alien artifact or an alien spaceship or an alien device, yeah, if we see it, even if we've never experienced it before, we can recognize that must have been the product of life. Even like within the field of science, they're looking for signs of life. They're looking for signs, not just of life, signs of intelligent life. And they have a certain criteria they're looking for. And what is that criteria? That criteria is related to things appearing to have function and so on and so forth. There's a list of stuff, complexity that's not likely to have been given rise to by randomness. Yeah, so like they're looking for things like structures. Yeah, like, are there structures, like, you know, if you're looking for some sort of like hyper advanced civilization, could you expect maybe to find structures that like surround like a star system or something, like massive features? They're looking for complexity. They're looking for signs of intelligence. And if they're looking for signs of intelligence, there must be a criteria. Yeah. And that criteria is linked to this. And as you increase in complexity, it's much more likely that this atheist is going to laugh at you. If we get to the Hadron Collider and I'm saying, oh yeah, this just fell out of the stars, that's you know, a rock hit a rock, it hit a rock, it hit another rock, and that accidentally created the Hadron Collider on our floor. And look at it now. They're doing this experiment stuff, but you know, that's just about it random. That's even more absurd than suggesting that is. And the reason is because it's increasing in these particular qualities. If you were to look into space around a sun and see this mega structure around a sun, like this mechanical thing that's surrounding an entire star, like it's you're not going to be thinking, oh, but in an infinite universe, it's very possible that could have happened randomly, and we just happen to be living in the universe where that did happen randomly. Like, you're not. That's not the conclusion you're going to come to, and I don't think any atheist would do if they saw a megastructure in any way, shape, or form. If we were to look on Mars or into the clouds of Venus, and on the base of that, you see these complex things, and they don't, like, even if the buildings are unlike any buildings that we've ever seen, yeah, you're not going to jump to the conclusion of randomness. You're not. It's not going to happen. If you see complexity that has function, that has purpose built into it, you're not going to go, oh, that's an accident. Now, the problem is that for some reason, we still do that. And when you look at like when we're describing the heart in biology classes, how do they describe it? Khalid, what is the heart? How, in a scientific way, as for biology, what would you describe the heart as? What does it do?
It has a function to pump the blood in some sense.
Yeah.
So some people are saying it's not technically right to say it's pumping, but yeah, still we can, for ease of conversation, say the function is to pump blood.
Yeah. So, but well, how would it not be? Who says that it's not pumping?
No, now some new research came in that they were saying that there's some other type of process that is mimicking pumping, but it is a bit different. But anyway, that the function is this.
It's somewhat abstract. It's still it's performing the same task of moving a liquid through tubes around the body. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's better.
That's the point of it. It's moving liquids around a cycle, and that liquid goes through certain passages which do something to it, and then once something has been done to it in certain parts of that passage, it then continues to move it even further to do something else. And you have this, like, it's a function. That's the function of the heart. It has a purpose. That's not something I've imposed upon it because I have one, in the same way I impose the function on this phone. It's very recognizable that the heart is there to do something. And it's very, very unlikely that that's accidental, because it's also playing a role with other parts that also have a function. What do the lungs do? How are the lungs described?
Yeah, again, the
That's
lungs
your
also have.
biology knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. So of
What
course
do you
the lungs
remember
also
from?
have.
Go on.
Yeah, for function is of course inhaling and exhaling. We take in the air, which has oxygen, nitrogen, and other kind of gases, and it converts them, and then carbon dioxide be inhale, exhale carbon dioxide. Of course,
Yeah.
there is a function.
So the function of the lungs is to oxygenate. There's a number of functions, but so the
Yeah,
main one is to oxygenate the blood and to get rid of carbon dioxide. Yeah. So
right.
if you're exercising, how do you lose your weight? How do you
Yes.
get lighter?
Yeah, yeah. So what are you exactly targeting? I don't know, but there's now research that talks about how when we lose the fat, actually most of the workout when we do and we lose our weight, it's actually not going through excretion, but actually through a carbon dioxide in some sense.
You breathe it out.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you
yeah.
remember, like oxygen is let's see, you might be able to see it. Oxygen is O2, yeah, and
Mm-mm.
these are links between atoms. The dashes, yeah. So O2 is two oxygen atoms stuck together. Carbon dioxide, yeah, so that's O2. Carbon dioxide is CO2. I can't remember exactly how that connects, but we'll just do so that the
Mm.
yeah, so it's
The whole
two.
process of ATP and ADP, adenosine triphosphate and adenosine
Yeah,
diphosphate, and anyway, yeah. But yeah,
mashallah, he's remembering his classes. Yeah, but the point is that CO2 is identical to O2, apart from the fact that it just has this extra carbon atom. Yeah, so you've got this extra atom, and that's the weight you're losing. You're losing carbon, and then plants
mm-mm.
take that in, and they take the carbon, and then they release the oxygen. And so we're trading carbon atoms with plants, right?
Mm-mm.
But that's a function that the lungs play. They take in oxygen, they take in O2, they take from the blood, they pump that into the blood, yeah. So they pump oxygen into the blood. The blood goes around the body to the different cells and takes carbon from elsewhere, and then that carbonated. I don't know if that's the way you would describe carbon dioxide. That carbonated oxygen comes back to the lungs, and then the lungs breathe it out and allows it to escape the body. Yeah, but that's a function. Like the lungs are playing a role, and again, the veins, they're connected to
Mm-mm.
this system. The atoms, the cells, the body is made up of like billions of cells, and each organ has its own role. The liver, the stomach, the brain, the this, the that. They all have their own particular function, and they all work together for a greater function. And we see this in phones. This is much more complex. This is way more complex than the phone. This is way more complex than the watch or even the Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
One single living cell is like a factory. Not just like a factory, it's more complex than a factory. It's a self-replicating factory. And it self-replicates in a way that these factories stick together to create larger organs that then play this huge role. And the information in the center of each one of these factories is the same. You've got these strings of DNA. And within the factory, you've got all these different component parts. You've got the lipid cell wall. Maybe we can pull up can you pull up an image of the cell? Just pull an image of the cell. But when you look at this, you see each of these things. Like the lipid cell wall is literally just like countless, and I'm not going to say the number, I can't remember how many, but there's a lot of like these lipid cell things that like they act one way on the outside of the cell and another way on the inside, and then they have like security systems, so they manage the type of things and organisms that can enter the cell. So there's a whole management system just in the cell wall. Then when things get inside of the cell, you've got this whole like production mechanism within the cell where certain materials will be taken and broken down and turned into things that can be used to build other things. You have these like protein builders that run along. Like it's mad. Just if anyone even just spends a little bit of time just looking into just one living cell, you should be in awe of like the organization that takes place just within a cell. And your body is made up of countless of these. And then that cell literally in the nucleus tears itself apart. These random tentacles come out of nowhere and grabs the DNA and rips it down the middle. And then these little devices, which are all microscopic, by the way, you've got to keep in mind these things are tiny, run up the half DNA and replicate. And like, I can't remember, was it ADCG? Was that it? What are the parts of the DNA? There's 4 potential parts. And I can't, you'll have to forgive me, but it's like A only matches with D and C only matches with G or whatever it is. I'm saying this from memory from years and years and years ago, so I'm probably getting it a little bit wrong. But that idea is basically what it's doing. And so when it sees a C, it creates an A. When it sees an A, it creates a C. When it sees a B, it creates a G. When it sees a G, it creates a B. And it runs up the DNA and duplicates it. And so, and then once it's duplicated, you end up with something that was 1. It's broken into 2 halves, and then it becomes a whole because it knows exactly what it needs to create in order to make it whole again. And then this is how you have mitosis. I can't remember the words. I'm really testing my old biology knowledge. But the point is that like there is an immense amount of complexity here. And if this is unlikely to be the product of an accident, if this is unlikely to be the product of something with wisdom, with knowledge, then if you're looking at, and Allah says in the Quran, there are signs within the heavens and within the earth and within your own selves for those who reflect. Yeah. And just looking at how life is functioning, how the parts of life are functioning, how each, like you can literally go in and you can keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. And the way all of these things, even if you go to the atomic level and you look at the periodic table and you look at how atoms form bonds and how they trade electrons and how the structure of the periodic table, the way certain kinds of bonds arise, because the way they describe like this atom sort of needs a certain amount of electrons, and so they'll share electrons with other atoms and maybe kick electrons out to allow that bond to create, and that gives rise to certain chemical features. Like certain chemicals are very corrosive, and the reason they're corrosive is a function of the way that the atoms in that substance behave around other substances. And it's like, it's beautiful. It's like art. Yeah. When you're looking at it, it's like there is these extreme patterns, and it links to what you were talking about. Like when you see all of these sort of like narratives where, and like you get a lot of this, like if you look into YouTube, and you look at, if you search Fibonacci sequence, if you search like the patterns in life, if you like, there's all these pictures that compare, like say for example the eye to like a galaxy or a nebula, and like these patterns that go from the micro to the macro, they're there, they're ever present. They're like, no matter where you look, you see art, you see design, you see this function in things, and this relationship within the set of contingent things, yeah, which stream about if these things themselves are expressing this, that I believe it does infer that whatever is responsible for this, whatever these things are dependent upon, that there is an element of knowledge and wisdom here that gives rise to this function and this purpose. This function and this purpose is being imposed on it in the same way that we impose function and purpose upon this or upon this or upon this. When we're creating them, they have the appearance of function because we built them with a function. They have the appearance of purpose because we built them with purpose, with a meaning, yeah, for a reason. And the reason that we can see that within our own selves even the atheists, when they describe the organs and so on and so forth, they're doing the same thing. They're recognizing purpose and function in these things. Now, the problem is that if you take atheism for granted, if you say that the universe is fundamentally, at base, in terms of its foundation, is completely absent of consciousness. There's no life at the base. This, if you're saying that the necessary thing, because remember, oh crap, how do I get back? Yeah, the necessary thing. Yeah, even if you disagree with my objection here, and you want to continue to say there is no God, yeah, and like you want to posit some sort of infinite reason, or you want to say that the universe, you want to say that the set of contingent things is the necessary thing, yeah. If you want to insist on that, then you can't suggest these things do have a purpose.
Right.
You can't, and this is a conversation at the moment with atheist-leaning scientists where they want to revise the language used in teaching science to move away from talking about things having function, because that if it is atheistic, function isn't the right word. It doesn't have a function. It's not the heart doesn't have a purpose. The heart isn't doing something because it wants a particular end. The organism, talking about organisms as if they're doing something for the sake of survival.
Yeah.
Again, it's like it's positing some type of like abstract notion of consciousness upon the species as a whole.
Right.
And go on.
Yeah, no, I was saying one remarkable part of this is actually the immune system that we have, like how complex the immune system that we have. It gets triggers, and there are so many different levels. And now people have an issue like how but it is definitely purposeful in some sense. But within now this debate within scientists, they cannot actually say explicitly that this is purposeful. So what they do is generally they use this as a design heuristic. They say they try to take it as a heuristic principle, where they talk about, okay, within evolutionary biology or biology in general, we have to assume that this has been designed, and then it makes sense to think about it in the right way in some sense. So they use it as a heuristic principle. Now people have an issue with that. But what's interesting is that, Francis Crick, who's the one who actually discovered the double helix of the DNA. So he says that, okay, I was trying to pull up the quote, but I did not get it exactly. But in some sense, he was saying that, we know they appear, these biological organisms or these functions, they appear to be designed so strongly, but we have to understand that this design is just an illusion. So it's like his fitra is telling him that, okay, no, this is design. So he's like, okay, if you have to be a biologist, you would see this everywhere, but then tell yourself, no, this is an illusion. No.
It says the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like in the God delusion, it like he's saying, the universe has the appearance of design. So he's conceding that when you look at the universe, it appears to be beautifully orchestrated and designed. But again, like in the same sense, in the same string of thought, he's insisting that it's just an illusion. It's not really designed. That would be ridiculous. But he's not justifying this in any meaningful way, to the degree that like professional atheist philosophers were embarrassed that he was associated with them. Like I can't.
Michael Roos.
Yes,
Michael Roos.
Yeah,
he said that after reading the God Delusion, I feel ashamed to be an atheist.
Yes, because he did it such a disservice, and it's annoying to people that take this subject seriously, that this is the type of thing that reaches popular masses. Yeah, like these very, very poor arguments. And if you go through the God Delusion, and like especially if you did it with someone who's trained in critical thinking and reasoning, you'll see that these arguments that he makes, they're like the kind of arguments that you make in philosophy 101. Like someone who's not familiar with the field, who comes into a class for the first time, they've not studied fallacies, they've not studied what clear reasoning is exactly. he makes the same kind of mistakes you would expect in a first philosophy class.
I remember Alvin Plantinga saying something like this, that he cannot even pass a basic philosophy class. If his argument won't even pass a basic philosophy class. That's what Alvin Plantinga says about him.
He'd get ripped to shreds by an atheist philosophy teacher.
Definitely.
And
one thing I would like to mention, is when it comes to the design also, when we're talking about, okay, this is very fitri and it touches our intuition, but at the same time, on a level, it can be formulated in some sense. Wilhelm Dembski actually presented this whole method of detecting design in some sense. It's known as the design inference or something. And along the lines, he tries to see this life within our universe, and he comes to the conclusion that this definitely points to design. It cannot be just chance or something. And he has a proper formulation. Is known as specified complexity, which links to design. So maybe that is one reference that we can give to some people. Second one is, you shared one video about the bacteria flagellum. I think so, it was that or something. Which engineers got shocked when they look within the cell, and how complex that is. And that was a very fascinating video that you shared. And like the person was saying, how can someone be an atheist after looking at this? I mean, the top level engineers, when they see like this complex level of engineering just within a simple cell. I mean, that is
Smarter Every Day.
Sorry?
The video was from Smarter Every Day, I think.
Okay.
Where he was going over the motor functions of microorganisms.
The
way they project themselves, and he's looking at how these how the tail of these microorganisms functions like an engine. Like it's got a proper rotary mechanism, and like he's looking at it, and he's an engineer. And so he's like, "What? Look at it! Like this is like a proper, like it's a proper engine. It's a propulsion engine. It forces movement in the thing, and it's like, and this is the thing when it comes to talking with atheists, what they'll do is they'll look at this kind of thing, and they'll often be like, they'll have to fall on the infinite universe thing, the multiverse, and it's their saving grace. It's what allows them their miracle. It's that there are so many universes out there. We just happen to live in that very unlikely one where these things come about accidentally while giving that expression of meaning and purpose. Now the thing is the only time they pop that out is against design arguments, and then they need this super lottery, like, like it takes a much larger leap. They talk about the god of the gaps. This is the infinite universe of the gaps. Like, it's such a massive leap to jump to the conclusion that this very, very unlikely set of circumstances. And I'm not just talking like you've bought a lottery ticket and you've won the lottery. I'm talking about, like, in order to win the lottery, you need to win another lottery. And in order to win that lottery, you need to have won another lottery. And every lottery win, the prize is another lottery ticket. And in order to get the prize, you've got to win like 1,000 lotteries in order to win the jackpot. And you've got to keep doing that with the same kind of odds. Over and over and over in a row without disconnection. Because if you fail, then you've got to go back to the first ticket and try to start all over again. It's an unbelievable win. It's like the chances are so minute that it doesn't make sense to posit that over something like theism, over the fact that, especially if you're convinced of this argument, of a necessary being, like, why, when you see the presence of these things, when you see the presence of function of like, why would you jump to the conclusion that it's the product of randomness when all of the evidence, like every example of things having function, always gives rise to the idea of something that has knowledge, something that has wisdom.
So one thing I would like to address when it comes to the infinite multiverse, I think there are various problems that we can highlight within the infinite multiverse. first things first is that, some philosophers even argue that you cannot have an infinite multiverse. It would be finite in some sense because they're competitive in infinite, and there are some issues related to that as well. But even if we grant that, the philosopher that I had a discussion with, actually within part one objection, and within part two another objection, he showed how there are two objections, very strong objections against the infinite multiverse argument. One is the Boltzmann brains objection, which actually shows that, when people actually think, philosophers and, cosmologists, when they think about an infinite multiverse, where there are all possibilities have manifested. The issue with an infinite multiverse is that when we posit an infinite multiverse, then it becomes more likely that we are not living in a real, where everything is real. It's just Boltzmann brains, and they show that this has more possibility than actually we living in a universe where Boltzmann brains are just brains, and all of this reality that we go through is just in hallucination. And then it would become more likely that we are experiencing that hallucination instead of actually living in this reality. That is one objection. When someone, now people can go and deeply and understand what the, how to unpack that. Second objection with the infinite multiverse is also the inverse gambler's fallacy, which is where, just by the fact that you show that there can be one possibility, you haven't explained that is this possibility. You again, like, for example, if a person is gambling, and let's say, astaghfirullah, let's say that he's gambling, and he wins every time, on the roulette, he always gets the exact number, whatever. People would not assume that, in one out of so many possibilities, one infinite universe, this has to happen. He cannot use that as a means to justify what actually happened. People would assume, no, there has to be some other explanation. It could be that he's cheating. The same way, just by positing that in an infinite multiverse there has to be one possibility, you cannot actually conclude that this is that possibility. There's a gap there between that possibility and we living in this universe. You cannot say, okay, that universe is this universe, because you have to go do extra explanation for why do you believe that one possibility out of those billions, trillions, or millions, or whatever, we living in the universe is that possibly, instead of some other thing, like, for example, instead of Boltzmann brains or some other possibility. These objections are some objections that highlight how a multiverse explanation does not fully address the issue. But another important thing is that, when you were highlighting about the multiverse, I think it is very interesting when we are dealing with these atheists and agnostic and these kind of people, the problem that they have with religion, or generally these things, that they're like, oh, no, I can't they compare religion to something like a unicorn, or believing in fairies or goblins. And
yeah. But like, its universe is even bigger than a unicorn.
Exactly. And then the problem is that when you, okay, so you think that religion would entail you to believe in flying unicorns and spaghetti monsters and stuff like that, and then you're like, oh, that's why I don't believe in religion. And then you, to deny God, you say that, okay, there's an infinite multiverse where every possibility has actually manifested in some sense.
Yeah, so you have to believe in unicorns now, because it, like,
exactly, you have
in the universe, there is a universe in which a unicorn exists.
Yeah, so you have to believe in some kind of unicorns. And then goblins exist, fairies exist. Even Lord of the Rings actually happened in some universe.
Yeah.
And any possibility happened. There are flying trees in one universe, and there are human beings small with wings, and they're flying around.
Yeah.
You have to believe everything.
Why have you got this objection to religion now then?
Exactly.
Like, if in that, and this is the point, it's like when they point at, say, spiritualists that believe in fairies, that believe in this, that, and the other, like even in an infinite universe, it could be the case that they live in a universe where these things do exist on their planet, and
and they're invisible.
Yeah, or that they only reveal themselves to people that believe in them. Like,
yeah.
So even within their own framework, they disequip themselves from these, like, childish sort of remarks that they make when they make a comparison, like Santa Claus. Like, in an infinite universe, it's perfectly possible that Santa Claus does exist, and that when they become older and they mature and they become adults, that reality is taken away from them, and even like false memories There's some sort of like they're asleep one day, and Santa's little helpers go around the world and sprinkle a dust on the face of adults and make them believe that they're the ones that bought the presents for the kids and gave them to the kids. But they didn't. It's just a false memory that there's been like magically imposed on them. In an infinite universe, that's perfectly possible. There's a universe where that kind of thing happens.
Exactly.
So it's and obviously we don't, for those watching, because there's always a guy that's going to be like, you believe in Santa Claus. I do not believe in Santa Claus. That's not the point of that counterexample. The point is that the infinite universe escape pass, the get out of jail free card. I might make, you know what? I've got cards. I could make myself a little get out of jail free card called Infinite Universe. But the point is that like it's very inconsistently applied. Like they pull it out of their hats here and there. What we're asking here is, okay, even in an infinite universe, even if you grant that it exists, what is more likely? And then even in an infinite universe, you have this necessary being that is distinct from the universe where this randomness occurs. If it has the telltale sign, like, because even in that infinite universe thing, like technically this should be possible. They shouldn't laugh at me if I suggest this is the product of randomness. They shouldn't laugh at me if I suggest that the Hadron Collider was an accident. And that someone just saw it and they was like, believe it, look at this. It does something. Let's pretend we built it, and everyone will pat us on the back and tell us how great we are. Like that is possible. That this thing accidentally appeared with this function, and that someone just hijacked it, and because they wanted like the world to congratulate them on their excellence, pretended that they were responsible for its development. So
one thing I want to add, maybe because we are piling up arguments, so I just want to give some other arguments also which we can develop from this kind of reasoning. So let's go back to what we were talking about, that the contingency argument would work even on a block, but then we have a specific kind of universe. One possibility we highlighted is fine-tuning, cosmological design, and also in some sense biological design. But now we can go further than that. There are some very interesting arguments that we can build. One is not about the fine-tuning of the laws, but the laws themselves. The fact that universe itself actually is not just a blob with nothing, but there are laws that govern the universe and the whole universe, even to the amount of even to the electron level, actually is orderly and consistent, and is consistently following these laws, and they function on those laws consistently across all of the universe, from this edge of the universe to that edge of the universe. And these are known as nomenological arguments for God's existence. There are some references I can highlight on the screen, but the point that remains is that this type of particular order, not just fine-tuning, but order, this is different from fine-tuning. This type of ordered universe with coherent and consistent laws itself is not something that you would expect under an atheistic universe, because under an atheistic universe, you have laws or you don't have laws, you have chaotic laws or you don't have any laws, you have nothing. And having laws is the same. You can't expect that there are orderly laws and consistent laws. Whereas in a theistic universe, you would find that, okay, we can expect that the universe is governed by some specific laws. And not just that, but there is another argument you can build on it, which is a very new argument built by Brian Cutter, Dr. Brian Cutter. And he explains how there is nomenological arguments and there is nomenological harmony, which is, if you look at the initial state of the universe, those laws that we have, the laws actually apply on the universe and then give out different new states. They generate new states. And then those new states generate new states within the universe. But the law is not just, in some sense, a law that is applying on the initial state. It applies on all the states of the universe, which shows that there is some kind of harmony between the specific law and that state, which then gives rise to new states, and the law is still applicable on that state. It's a bit complex.
No, so to try and simplify it, you've got this sort of initial set of laws which are applied to this like line of development, like the history of the universe as it goes through these different stages. Right. And it turns from one state into another. For example, it turns into from the Big Bang, you just got this huge spread of energy all
Right.
over the place. And then that spread of energy spreads it out, which allows for the conditions for the early stages of matter to appear, like quarks and electrons, etc. That's one stage. And then that stage develops into another stage where atoms start to form. And that stage changes into another stage where those atoms start to collect, creating
Right.
stars and planetary systems. And you like so on and so forth. You've got this
Right.
development of stages in the history of the universe, which inevitably gives rise to this particular moment, this particular stage, where you now have living organisms that talk and communicate and do
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
self-reflective.
Yeah. And then what he's trying to say is that, the mapping of the laws are formulated specifically in that sense that every state of the universe they apply. But in a naturalistic universe, you can imagine a different mapping that just maps onto the first stage and then stops, or maps onto the second stage and then it is not the harmony isn't there between the law and the change of states of the universe.
Yeah.
That itself is an argument where you see the mapping of these laws are in that sense that no matter how much the universe evolves or changes with the states change, the mapping is formulated in that way that they still apply in some sense and bring out new states. So I just want to give out the plethora of arguments so that I'll continue with that. So we have nomological argument, nomological harmony, then we can add fine tuning, which is the specific kind of universe we have. But we don't just stop there. There are different kinds of fine tuning arguments. So one was just for life. There are some that formulate that there is fine tuning specifically for sentient life like us. But then Robin Collins, who has come up with this argument that he shows that the universe is not just fine tuned for life or sentient life, but it is actually fine tuned for people like us to do science in some sense. And that is also a very interesting argument. I'll expand on that a bit. So imagine there was one statement that Neil deGrasse Tyson made once. He was talking to one interview and he's saying that, if you want to go to China, learn Mandarin. If you want to go to Spain, learn Spanish. But if you want to go to the universe, then learn math, because math is the language of the universe in some sense. It's that simple. Even Galileo said that the universe is written in the language of mathematics. So now this raises some questions for naturalism. Why? Because if you believe that there is no mind behind the whole universe, there is no consciousness behind the universe, why is it the case that, okay, the universe has laws, those laws are written or can be formulated in the language of mathematics? It's like a cosmic language. Mathematics
and mathematics is very, very strictly tied to laws of logic. Like there's principles within maths that, like, for example, 1 + 1 always equals 2. I know there's new arguments, but this is more about definitions that make like if you define one other than as is typically understood, then you can start to change what that means. But that's like a postmodern sort of a redefining. But insofar as 1 as it is typically understood plus as it is typically understood in terms of addition, 1 always equals 2. If I have, like, here we go. So this is 1 unit. This is 1 unit. By adding, I mean I bring this one next to this one. I now have 2. Like if we're using that strict definition of the number 1 of addition and of equals, these always equal 2. There's not like, it's not possible to suggest otherwise. And it's because mathematics follows strict laws in terms of, this necessitates that. And if it didn't, you wouldn't be able to the scientific method would not work. It wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to, like, when you're learning, when I studied science in college, I did combined science. And in that they taught us chemistry, physics, and biology. And they also taught us mathematics. That was like a necessary part of it. And it was complex mathematics, and it was tied into each and every single one of those other 3. Because in each of them, you're doing equations, you're using math, you're applying what you've learned in maths, and how, like, complex algebra works, how reformulating equations. Like, for example, when if you have an equation and the answer, so I know it equals this, and I know that these three things here in relation to each other give rise to this, but I don't know the value of this. Can I work it out? Well, I can if I rejig it. If there is an unknown here, but I know this one, and I know what they equal, I can deduct this from this side and add it to the opposite side. I can deduct this from that side and add it to the other side. And then what you have is you have an equation the other way. So now you can figure out what that one equals because you knew the other two variables and you knew the answer. And so even this idea that you can rejig a formula and move things from the beginning to the end. And like, for example, if I say, we could do it here. So if I don't know this one and I say this plus 4 plus 3 equals 10. Yeah. I can work that out. Obviously, this is a very simple way of doing it. And you could probably, because it's a very simple form of it, work it out without me having to do this. But one way you could do it is you could minus 3 from both sides. So you could get rid of this, and then you go minus 3. And then you go minus 4 from both sides. So minus 4 removes that, and then you do that, minus 4. Yeah, and now you have the means to be able to work out the answer. So 10 minus 3 minus 4 equals minus equals 3. Yeah. So now if we were to go back, you know the answer to it was so plus 3. Oh, where's the plus sign? Plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. So they do the same. Like if you look at the equation for the force of gravity, so the force of gravity is equal to G, the constant, multiplied by multiplied by the mass of one object multiplied by the mass of the second object divided by the distance between the two squared. Baby 2. We'll just have to do that. Yeah, and if you know this, this, and this, or let's say you know that and that, and you know this, but you don't know the mass of the second object, you can work it out if you know the force of gravity and like by rearranging it. And you could do that by like dividing this or multiplying the distance between the two squared. And so on and so forth. So like obviously this is a very simple version, but it like obviously in physics and in biology the equations are much more complex. But the whole point here is that there is a consistent law being applied to the world of mathematics that allows it to be intelligible, that allows the members of the scientific community to be able to communicate these features of the universe to each other and to explore them and to discover new things about it. Part of that is the idea that the world is intelligible, that it is something that follows laws, that it is something that follows these patterns, which are recognizable and explorable.
And so the brilliant and what's remarkable about this argument, if you think about it, is that under naturalism, the human being is just an accidental byproduct of nature, nothing else. Like it's just like, a crackling of a door. It's just like that. It has nothing, no value, nothing. But how can this just accidental byproduct of nature be able to fathom a cosmic language and understand its laws and have this kind of inner mind that can work them out and understand, we can actually calculate, okay, there is the asteroid, this is the speed, this is the distance, okay, exactly on that time it's going to hit on this place and that place. Why can we do that? So under naturalism, it is very surprising for a being like us to be able to do science and understand this cosmic language. The cosmic language itself is a problem for naturalism, and us having the ability and this kind of correspondence between the two, like our abilities and then the whole universe having a cosmic language. I mean, that
what is language? Language is the idea of communicating between agents that can use language.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like if you're learning Chinese and you're in order to communicate, with
Yeah.
the Chinese, like the presence of this language, or even like looking at that and trying to figure out what's going on here. What's this person saying? Why is this person doing what they're doing? Like, and again, this sort of links to the language that's being used as well. The laws of nature, the way that this is being described. A big part of this is tied to a lot of the assumptions that the scientific community in its early stages had about the universe in their relationship to being religious specifically. Yeah, that they understood the universe to be something ordered, that there is a lawgiver, hence the title, The Laws of Universes, that it came from that because they're the people that were developing the scientific method, whether that was, the people from the Muslim world, what was his name? Ibn Haytham, was it?
Ibn Haytham, yes.
Yeah, the one who developed the scientific method in the first place. The production of scientific development in Andalus, in Baghdad, all of these things. And then in the Christian world as well, with the likes of Isaac Newton and so on and so forth, all of who were theists, not necessarily like traditional Catholics or Christians, but they believed in God. They believed in a lawgiver, and the language that was being used expressed that belief. They believed the world was ordered, that it wasn't chaotic and random, that it was intelligible, that you could explore it and understand it. They talked about the universe in the same way that someone talks about a clock, like that it's something that could be reverse engineered. And because it was, because it was something that was created with the function and design, that it was possible to examine it and understand the function of the parts in the same way that a scientist could pick up a device that tells the time. If it was done in a unique way, they could reverse engineer it to try and figure out. This is what the Chinese do with US technology. They try to get examples of it, and they get it, and then they try to reverse engineer it so that they can replicate it. Yeah. And we're doing the same thing. It's like we're looking at something, we recognize there is function in it, that there is a law, that there is some type of intelligence behind it. And because we believe it is intelligible, we treat it in such, and then we try to reverse engineer it and figure that out. Now, just a note. So I recognize we've.
So one thing.
Well, one moment. I just want to address this this table, because we've said a lot that I've not been able to add on. I will try and reread this. I'll maybe take the transcript and pump it through ChatGPT and ask it to make some recommendations on how I can connect this to this thing. And I'll play about with it a little. I'm trying to sort of do it as we're talking, but it's difficult to type and listen and communicate and have a conversation at the same time. But yeah, so do forgive me, be patient with me. If you've got any suggestions about how we could edit this or what we could attach to this, or maybe, if there's some like an extra box you think we should add to this one, if there's an extra box we should add to that one, feel free to add that into the comments and make your suggestions. But just to sort of summarize, I think where we've been, so that we can understand there is at least some sort of path we're taking here. We've been specifically arguing from the design argument, and we're talking about the presence of purpose, function, and meaning in the universe, and that giving a reason to believe that which is responsible for the universe has these attributes, that the expression of these things, in the same way that if you see it present in any type of creation, if you see it present in a painting, the skill of the artist is very much like, if you take a drawing of that I did when I was a kid, I might even have one. Yeah, I wasn't very good. Like I would, I was a child. I drew badly. You could deduce from that, if I show you a picture of me drawing as a child, you would deduce from that I was probably a child. Yeah, that I didn't have the skill, that I wasn't. Whereas if I take one of my later pictures, because I practiced a lot, I became quite good at it in the later stages of life, you would maybe deduce that I was someone who has spent a lot of time, who had knowledge of art, had knowledge of composition and of shading and of this and of that. You can come to that conclusion by looking at the products of my creation. Yeah, and we're saying here the same thing, like, in the same way that you could deduce attributes of the person here, with regards to this, you can deduce that they had wisdom and knowledge of engineering and of development of science, etc. We're saying here that, like, if you're looking at the universe and you're seeing function and design and present within the living cell, within the human being, within the universe, within the foundations of the universe, within its law, within
initial state, and
all of that, within our ability to be able to even communicate that and explore it and communicate it to each other and to advance our understanding and our knowledge base tied to all of these things. All of that gives rise to the conclusion that the necessary being has these attributes, of knowledge, of wisdom. We can move on to the other ones as well. You wanted to add?
Will, we can attach this to will, I think.
This one?
Yeah, in some sense, yeah.
Yep.
And I'll give you like, so now that I'll give some brief arguments for will as well. Like what some people also do is that they attach the Kalam cosmological argument specifically with the contingency argument. If we can show that the universe actually had a beginning, and we won't go deep into that argument. If the Kalam cosmological argument works and that the universe did have a beginning, so the necessary existence is something that does not have any beginning or end. It has to be eternal. So when an eternal uncaused cause give rise to a finite, let's say contingent reality, that itself can be an argument for the will in some sense. Why? Because like if there is if necessary existence which has necessary existence, if it's determining something, if it's something is being determined out of it, then the effect itself would be in some sense eternal. But then if the effect is finite in some sense and the cause of it is eternal, then will makes more sense than like some process, because will actually will is something that can explain why the necessary existence bring about a finite effect in time in some sense. So some people use this example. I think this was formulated by Imam Al-Ghazali, if I'm not mistaken. Some people give the example of if there is an eternal flame, the light that comes out of it also has to be eternal. But if the effect is limited and the cause of it is eternal, then this shows some signs of will involved in this. And other ways to make sense of this is actually like, how can you, if we can show that if an infinite regress is not possible in some sense, you go back to an uncaused cause. Now, how would you make sense of an uncaused cause giving rise to these chains of causes? And if you say that this was deterministic, it was not by will, because will and determinism, something deterministic and something like free will, they in some sense are like, opposites in some sense. So if you say that this was deterministic, and then you can ask the question, okay, if there is an uncaused cause, what determined this uncaused cause to bring about or to start the chain of causes in some sense? And then you can say, oh, there is something within this uncaused cause, or there is something outside of it. So if there is something outside of it, this isn't the uncaused cause. That is the uncaused cause in some sense, because that is you are saying that this is the cause behind it. Or if it's something internal, then that should be the uncaused cause and not this thing. So then it again raises another infinite chain of what caused that thing, what caused this thing to actually bring about, to start this chain of causes, or to do something to this thing, and then the chain of cause starts. But then if you explain this by an external cause, what about this thing? How do you explain this determines the chain of causes? So you might explain something within it or something outside it. So you again fall back into these lines of infinite regresses. So the wise solution out of this is only if you give the power of will to this thing. And if this thing has will, that can break this kind of deterministic question and show that, okay, this thing actually has a will in some sense. This thing has a choice to bring about, rather than there's something internal within it that is entailing it necessarily or determining it necessarily, or something outside of it. That does not make sense, but will make sense in this case. Yeah, so that was a very brief summary. Though, like, some people have a problem with the infinite chain of regresses. That's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, if you don't accept
so this is okay. So if you accept that an infinite regress is impossible, even because atheists can accept that as well, it's not necessarily problematic. It's not theistically, it's not theistically entailed necessarily. Like there could be other ways of like accepting that, and then you could still disagree about whether or not that entails God after it. But for those of you who do think that there is a problem with infinite regresses, for whatever reason, then you can tie that to will. So there's like, I don't know if I could do like a one in the middle. Yeah, but yeah, that's the point.
There's one more argument. Yeah. So yeah, there's one more argument. I think, not argument, but yeah, there's one more formulation of this, which is when we look at explanation, causal explanation are of two types. Either it could be a scientific deterministic explanation, a mechanistic explanation, where we see that, okay, this thing gave rise to this thing gave rise to this thing gave rise to this thing. And this is what generally we talk about in science. Science does not generally does not talk about the other form of causal explanations. The other form of causal explanations are agency explanations or volitional explanations. So when there are these two types of explanations, generally within our life, we use both. When I'm, for example, making tea for someone can ask me, oh, why is the water boiling? I can give two explanations. One is maybe because the thermal energy from the heat stove is actually being transferred into the water molecules, and they are because of that they are becoming more vigorous and they are changing from liquid state to gaseous state. That is just one explanation. That is a mechanistic explanation. At the same time, there is explanation based on volition. Is maybe I'm making tea for you and me, so that is a volitional explanation. And both of these explanations, many of the times, they apply in our reality. But when it comes to mechanistic explanations, generally, for example, takes a perspective of science itself, we can go back into this talking about one explanation by talking about its prior states. Okay, this gave rise to this. Generally in science, this is what we do. But when we go back and to the end, to the beginning of the universe, to the beginning, and that is the first initial state of the universe, and that is the first state, then it is very hard to derive a prior mechanistic state for it. So when you cannot have a prior mechanistic state for the first initial conditions of the universe, then out of these two causal explanations, only the one is left, because that itself would be the first initial state. So you can't give a prior mechanistic state for that. So then if this causal explanation fails, then the other causal explanation, which is will, agency, volitional, that can explain it. So that is also, maybe in some cases, you can derive a will from that.
Yeah, mashallah. And so there's another way as well. So there's when you see things. I might need time to think about this one actually, because I need to sort of go over what I remember of it. But so I think we've got, and I'm going to try and formulate this a lot better. But how would you summarize it? So far for the design argument, purpose, function, and meaning, I wrote, so there are certain qualities that are signs of design: complexity that is not likely to be the products of randomness, function in its parts tied to its complexity to give rise to a larger function, and function tied to purpose. So here, so purpose is tied specifically to consciousness, something aware that has goals it wants to achieve and makes things towards the achievement of that goal. There are lots of examples of extreme function in the universe, greater complexity and function than it is present in items we ourselves create, like phones, hadron colliders, and blah, 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 blah. For example, organs and living organisms, the living cell, DNA, larger ecosystems, laws of nature, the wider universe, etc. Language, communication between entities which understand. Mathematics is the language of the universe, and mathematics is heavily tied
to logic.
Yeah, to logic. The laws of logic to and mathematics is fundamental to the universe, the creation of the universe, and its continued existence. It's being sustained. It's being sustained. If we can recognize this in simple objects with these qualities to a lesser degree, we should be able to recognize it in entities with these qualities to a higher degree.
Yeah, and you know what I would like to also mention is that teleology, when it comes to things having a purpose, the human being itself is a being that is fully driven by teleology. Like us having this conversation is also teleological. We have a purpose. We are having this for a purpose. For someone who's watching this discussion is also not just mindlessly, like, has no purpose, but actually chose this video out of many different videos because he has a purpose. Some people who become have a very scientific, like, mind, who are so involved in scientism, they forget to realize that, okay, science as a discipline does not fully incorporate teleology. Many physicists say that, teleology is a dirty word for science, or it is incompatible within science. And so because it is not fully incorporated within science, they just negate teleology altogether. But when
I would argue that it's necessary for science. Like, you can't have science without teleology. Like, you can't like explore things as having necessary connections to each other and causal links and so on and so forth. If there isn't some, like, you can't talk about the human body in any meaningful way without talking about the function of its parts, without talking like, if you remove this language of teleology, like it's almost like a binding agent for conversations within each of these.
And you know what the issue is, I think, is generally why scientists don't like that term is because they are working under the assumption of methodological naturalism. And when they talk about these teleologies, it directly points to God. Or many of these.
It always gives that conversation, it forces it. And if they've got atheistic leanings in any way, that is going to be something that causes a cognitive dissonance, or it's going to be something that causes some type of tension within their worldview, and they have to get rid of one or the other. Now, obviously, if they're like, their whole being revolves around being a scientist, they're not going to want to throw out the scientific method because of its necessary connection to teleology. What they would rather do, because obviously if they do that, they're going to lose their jobs, or they're going to have to completely rechange their life, figure something else out. Because science, I would say, is fundamentally dependent upon teleology. What they have to do in order to be able to continue being scientists is they have to think of a way of removing
restricting
that teleology.
Yeah,
which is the problem. But so I think we've sort of explored.
Yeah. So how much time do you have? Are you tired now, or maybe you can continue?
So we can maybe touch on this one briefly.
Power, and then we can start with consciousness and others. Next time, what do you think?
Inshallah.
Okay. Inshallah.
But with regards to power, so like, you've got this connection between, so you've got the necessary being sustains and provides contingent things have some amount of power, non-zero. We'll say non-zero. I'm just sort of throwing words around here. Hopefully you're following what that's trying to communicate. So contingent things have some amount of power, not non-zero. So like, they have, and whatever we mean by power, energy, the ability to do work, whatever that is, like, all of these things contain power. Everything is made up of atoms. Atoms, if you split them, give rise to huge explosions. It's the expression of the vast amount of energy that's contained in each and every atom that makes up each and everything. So everything has some amount of power, non-zero. Contingent things are dependent on the necessary being. Whatever power they receive, they must receive from the necessary being. Therefore, the necessary being is the source of all power. So whatever power there is within the set of contingent things, it has to come from the necessary being. If these things come into existence and they're created with power, then that power originates in that which give rise to them. Yeah. Now, if the universe is infinite, which many atheists like to suggest, then it follows that the let me zoom in because that's very tiny. Then it follows that the necessary being has infinite power. Is all powerful. If the universe is finite, then the necessary being has at least that amount of power. There is an unquantifiable amount of power. Is it's a very impressive. There is an so at minimum, the necessary being
would be the source of that power.
Yeah, but it's still impressively powerful at minimum.
Agree.
And it's still possibly infinite. Now, with revelation, we can confirm his power is infinite, or that he is all powerful. So this point here is important, because with reason alone, if you do posit that the universe is infinite, then there should be no problem if you accept this reasoning, suggesting that God or the necessary being is all powerful, that it has this attribute. Yeah. That should be very simple for someone to accept. People like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, believed Allah eternally created. The majority view, I believe, is that Allah existed alone and then He created. And there's the universe is a finite set. Now, if it is finite, if you look at the universe and try to quantify, I should stop waving a knife around. If you look at the universe and quantify the amount of power, it's still unfathomably large. Yeah? And if this exists and it is finite, then whatever gave rise to it has at least that much amount of power. Now, some might argue here, and they do, that might be all of the power. Now, I would argue not necessarily. That doesn't say that at all. And even if you were to sort of split it 50-50, and you split this 50-50, you still have a much greater reason to incline towards God being all powerful. Because either the universe is infinite or it is not. If it is if it is infinite, it's definitely all powerful. If it's not infinite, it's still possibly all powerful. And if you look at how big the universe is, that's still very, very impressive. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's exhausted all of its power. There's no necessary reason to jump to that conclusion. And if it's capable of this, there's not any reason as well to jump to the conclusion that it can't add to that or make it bigger. But again, they're always positing some type of multiverse anyway. And if they really want to believe in that, that's the multiverse as well could even be finite. They could be
Right.
like exist alone and create a multiverse where like countless universes are all being created simultaneously. So that's not necessarily incompatible. And if he's able to do that, then again, like his power is infinite. He's all powerful. But we can at least come to the conclusion, regardless, that he is the source of all power. Yeah, however much power there is, and even if that the expression of that is finite, that there is still the possibility that he's not exhausted that. And I also think the continued sustaining of that, because it's not just that it was created and then it fizzled out, but that there is a continued effort to sustain that and allow it to develop. I think this is also an evidence that that power hasn't been exhausted in the creation of it. Yeah, that there is still effort in continuing that existence and continuing the relationship between all of these things and continuing to manage them all as a totality. That as well, I think, should incline someone to believing in God being all powerful rather than having a finite amount of power. But in any way, any sense, like we've at least got the attribute of power here. Yeah. Being the source of power. And I think we've got greater reason to incline towards being all powerful. And I think if we make a good case for revelation in particular, you've got 100% reason to accept that he's all powerful. Because if this revelation does come from God, and God is telling us about himself, you've got good reasons now to as well understand how that takes place. I'm gonna actually, that might be a better way of doing it.
Yeah, and one thing, maybe the last thing that I want to add is also when it comes to attributes, I think we should go for the simple explanation at times, and the necessary existence being all powerful is much more of a simple explanation than the necessary existence having limited power. Because if the necessary existence has limited power, then you need a further explanation why it is that degree of power and not one less or one more.
And so then it sort of posits that there must be something above that which doesn't have that limit, which then
sets the limit. Yeah,
exactly. So it just sort of furthers the problem and then pushes it further. And then if you're going to say this is limited in its power, then that isn't God. There must be something above that which doesn't have a limit in its power, which then obviously
and we can apply that to knowledge as well, wisdom as well. So if the necessary being has limited knowledge in some sense, then again that is a complex explanation. There, if you apply Occam's razor of having full knowledge, being omniscient in some sense, makes more sense than saying that this being has limited knowledge. Because when we are talking about the necessary existence, in some sense, you are adding more complexity by giving it some kind of arbitrary limits. When it has these attributes, it makes more sense to posit that these attributes are maximal to the highest degree possible, because that is a simple explanation. Whereas any other limited quality that you ascribe to the necessary existence, that requires further explanation, which makes it more complex, and there's no reason for that.
Alhamdulillah. So I think
maybe this is enough for today for both of us.
My brain's pretty frazzled now. I need to get maybe get another coffee in me. But the point is that I think we've made a case here now for knowledge, for wisdom, for power, for will. There's probably ways as well we can tie these to life or
life consciousness.
This one. Yeah, so I think we could tie that one to this one, to consciousness or awareness.
But maybe we can expand on that in the next session, inshallah.
So I think there's other things that we can use to add to these as well. So we'll do that at another time. And then the other ones as well, obviously these are dependent on R and P. So when we go into them, we'll go into them if we go back to GORAP. We would inshallah go into it with this one and with this one. So that would go, and that would then obviously link back here to that. Or specifically that one at the bottom. Maybe if I just bring them here. Oh.
Hmm. Inshallah, once it's fully complete, we'll try to share it with everyone also, so they will enjoy, inshallah.
Yeah.
And they can go through it themselves.
Yeah, I need to tidy it up. As well as it becomes more complex, we end up having to like sort of reorganize these boxes so that they fit nicer, but you'll see as it sort of progresses. It's a really cool app. For those of you that want to know, this app is called Obsidian. It's a really cool app. You also get this cool feature. Woo. I love it. So it shows you all of the different notes that you've got.
Oh, nice.
And how they connect. And you can.
Oh, interesting.
This essentially is just showing the connection. So that's like my finances total for the year. So this little blob here, that's just my notes on my finances. A guide to dealing with ethics. That's ethics and the different notes. Obviously, as you make more and more and more notes, this gets more and more complex and cooler. There's some really cool ones where people have been using this for years, and they have this massive thing, and it's like you can filter it, so you can filter certain tags. So if I just search ethics, like it narrows it down to that one. Attachments, existing files, only certain groups, so you can pick certain groups, new group, display.
Wow.
So you can have a look at different things, node size. Yeah, so you can make these bigger. If I get rid of that completely, you've got these.
Yeah, we're getting free promotion for Obsidian as well.
It's a free app. It's yeah. And there's lots of like mods you can get for it and stuff. So it's really really cool.
Oh wow.
Line thickness, you can do that. Forces, center. Oh, that's weird. So you can make them like you can increase the gravity, or you can let them like drift away from each other, repel forces. Wow,
that's should we? Interesting.
Even that's just really cool to play with. Link distance. But it's so there's a really cool book called How to Take Smarter Notes, I think. And so this system is based off something called the Zettel what's it called? There you go. What's it called? The Zettels. Yeah, these are called Zettel Notes. Or I can't remember the full name. But it's a really good book, How to Take Smarter Notes. And there's a guy who built this system on note taking.
Wow.
He talks about like fleeting notes, literature notes, and permanent notes or Zettel notes. And you have like a box, a slip box, and you add them to it. And he did it physically. Which was really cool. And the way he did it is that his note taking manifested into essays and or books because of the way he did his notes, and that they would link together to formulate these like paths of thought that he would just sort of knit together in an essay and then publish, or knit together in a book and publish. And I really recommend it for anyone looking into it. So the book is called How to Take Smarter Notes, and these are called the Zettel Notes. So they're German. Germans always produce such cool things, cool cars, apart from political systems. It's like one of their major flaws. But when it comes to like philosophy, science, and stuff, that they're really interesting people. And motor vehicles, engineering, they're great engineers. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today.
Yeah, so inshallah, on that note, we end this episode, and I'm really excited to maybe see you back and work on our project, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, and Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.